Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I will be your host today. My name is Vanya. I'm the technical support engineer with 7Pace. I've been with 7Pace since November of last year, and maybe you've already seen my name on some of your tickets if you have created any tickets. And today we will be discussing the 7Pace Timetracker API and reporting. If you have any questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end. So you should feel free to type your questions in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. So to kick things off, let's talk about some characteristics of the API and some important information about it. So the Timetracker API uses the OData protocol for all operations, meaning that any OData statements can be used with the Timetracker API. So this is not unique to the Timetracker API. We use the OData protocol. One very important thing to note is that the reporting, in order for it to work, the service account must be enabled. And also, very important, the service account user has to be a DevOps collections administrator. If it is not, then Timetracker or the Timetracker API won't have access to everything within DevOps that it needs to have access to in order to query the data from DevOps. Also, the Timetracker API uses basic authentication. Now, the API has some limits. Those are that the work logs endpoints return data by 1,000 items per page, and that all endpoints related to work items return data by 100 items per page. The current available versions of the API are Timetracker API version 1. This one is no longer in use. Then we have the 2.1 version. This is in use, but we do not recommend using it due to its limited nature. And then we have the version 3.0, which is recommended to use, and the 3.1 beta version of the Timetracker API, which is also very much recommended because of all the various options that you get with using this API. So the API version 1, when I said it's limited, it is limited. It only has time entry export capabilities. So you can only export your time entries from the 1.0 version of the API. Version 2.1 is able to export custom fields. You can connect to SSIS using this version, and you can use dynamic parameters in Excel Power Query. The 3.0 version uses OData query extended parameters and data formatters. So you get a whole new set of options with this API version. And also, one new thing is that you can connect to other APIs. So you can connect to Excel, to C#, Python, JavaScript, Power BI, etc. And the last but not least is the version 3.1 beta, which provides access to additional endpoints which are not contained in the 3.0 version of the API. So you get new additional options with this API. So the types of tokens used with Timetracker are the DevOps token and the reporting API token. The DevOps token is used to perform requests from Timetracker to the DevOps API. The Timetracker Reporting API token is used to query data from the end user to Timetracker. So now let's head over into Timetracker. And here we are on the Timetracker page. This is the settings page. You can find your time tracker in your DevOps project on the left-hand side. It's going to be here at the bottom. So we click on settings and we go into the reporting in REST API, and we see here that the current report state is retrying to process. Now why is that? Because the service account is not enabled, and it's not enabled because I removed it, so I can show you how to set it up. It's pretty straightforward. The service account, as I said earlier, needs to be a collections administrator in DevOps, which my account is. So I'm going to set myself as the service account. And there we go. You're now the service account user. Now, usually a bar will appear here where it will say that Timetracker needs to be authorized. So if you do get that pop-up saying that Timetracker needs to be authorized, please click on authorize in order for Timetracker to work properly. But I am not getting this to trigger right now. Okay, let's go back to reporting in REST API, where we will be creating our token. So this is where we click create new token, and we copy that token to clipboard. And this is what we're going to be using for querying. So now let's head on over into Postman. And here we are. So what we are going to do here is get a new request going, go over to the authorization tab and select the basic authentication. And here we leave the username blank, and under the password we paste the token that we just copied. Sometimes maybe you might be required to use a username. In that case, you should use token, simply token. That will work. Yes, and one more thing to note. So this is a very important page here that we have. This is where you can find all the different OData expressions that you can use, the 7-page Timetracker API reference, and you can select all of the available APIs here, but we're going to select 3.0, and we have all the different kind of requests that we can make, and also the endpoints that we can use. So for instance, if we wanted to use work logs only, or work items, we can expand it, and we see that there are some examples of what data would be returned by querying this endpoint. So we can see the system title, for instance, or the system team project. The system team project is the project name, system title is the work item name, and there's different information here, like the parent item, and so on. All right. So how would we go about actually creating our query? We have to choose a an endpoint, and actually we have to know what we want to do with our query, what we want to query. We have substantial documentation on what can be queried on all the endpoints. So this is for version 3 of the API, and you can read the overview, the API limits, the endpoints. Now this is what we want. This is where we want to look at. So let's choose the work logs only endpoint, and let's say we want to use this report. How many hours did every user add into the system during a specific period? And if we take a look at, this is the query that we need to append to the URL. If we take a look at this, this is coming from the Timetracker endpoints, and this, like apply, group by, aggregate, order by, these are all OData commands. So they are coming from OData. And you can read more on them here, these links. But we're not going to follow those right now. Let's go back here. So how do we assemble it? Where is this coming from? Where's this coming from? Or timestamps? Simple. So the endpoint is work logs only. So we find it here in the reference page, the API reference page. So we open up work logs only, and we want to know how many hours every user added into the system during a specific time period. So what we need is the time period. So we need the timestamp, right? So this is the timestamp where we get it from. This is the format that we use for the timestamp. This is the period length. And then we have user, username, and that's all we need for this query. So whenever you need to whenever you want to query an endpoint, you can just come to this page, the API reference, and you can see all the elements of that endpoint, all the data that can be queried. And let's go back into Postman, where we are going to make our first request. And our first request will be a report of, for instance, how many hours did every user add into the system during a specific time period. So I'm going to explain in the request. So here we have the project, we have the URL actually for our project. Here we are defining that we're using the API, Timetracker API version 3.0, and we are querying the work logs only endpoint. We're applying a filter. The filter is timestamp. So we are only querying data for timestamps between the 1st of November until the 1st of January 2021. Also, we are grouping it by username, and we also want the sum of the time. So we are using period length with sum is period length. So we want the total time that the users added. So let's query that. And here we go. So this is for this period of time, this specific user added this total amount of time. The time is displayed, the sum of time is displayed in seconds. So if you divide by 3,600, you'll get hours. And now let's head over into Excel and do the exact same query in Excel. Now Excel, the way to connect to the API is to go over to the Data tab, and you click on Get Data from Other Sources, and then from OData Feed. And here's where we would put our URL. So let's just go ahead and copy that URL from Postman. And we click OK. And now we're seeing this. We couldn't authenticate with the credentials provided. Please try again. But how do we resolve this? We click on Basic. And the same as with Postman, we leave the username blank and the password is the token. And we can just copy it from Postman, put it here, and we connect. And there we go. We are connected and we're getting these records. Let's go ahead and load that. And here we are. The data that we queried. If we want to go and change this query, we can always go into editing and we'll see the source query here. This is the source query. So if we want to change anything, we change it over here. Now let's say we do want to change. Let's say we want to see the distribution of time per project. Now how will we do that? Well, we would have to use a different endpoint and different query. So we would go over to our Timetracker Reporting API documentation, and we would have to use this endpoint, work logs, work items. So you see we have this query here, distribution of time per project, work log, work items endpoint, and we apply grouping, group by work item, system team project. And the system team project, that is the DevOps naming for just the project. And we would aggregate the period length with sum as period length again. So we would have the sum of all the time that was tracked during this for this specific project, and we would order it by here in this query by work item in the project. So what do we do? How do we know that we need this endpoint, for instance? So we want to see the distribution of time per project. So we need time, we need work logs. That's where you get all the time that's logged, and we want the specific work items in this specific project. So we need to query the work items as well. So we have to use this work logs, work items endpoint. So let's head on over here and click on the work logs, work items endpoint, work logs, work items endpoint. And we see here what data we can get from this endpoint. So we can get the work item ID, we can get the user ID, we have the timestamps, we have the period length, which is the total time, and we have system team project. And the system team project, this is the project, the project name. So let's go ahead and use this. Let's go ahead and use this query. So here we go. Work logs, work items. We're applying grouping for work item system project. Well, project. And let's see what we get. There we go. We have the work items and the period length, but we can't see the work item IDs. So we need to expand this. And we get the system team project, which is the team project name, the project name. So we get the project name and we get all the time that was logged on that specific project. And also, one very important thing to note when you're querying the Timetracker API is to always use filters, because if you query just an endpoint directly, you will be generating additional load because you'll be querying huge amounts of data. It'll increase response time, and this will result in more time that you'll be waiting for responses, and you could even end up in timeouts. And also, there are API limitations that you might easily breach just by querying an endpoint due to the amount of data. So always use filters. That's our advice to you. Just always use filters, please. Now let's say that we want to see how much time was spent on an epic during a specific time frame. First, we need to see which endpoint we would be using. So let's go back here to source. We wouldn't be using the work logs, work items endpoint because that doesn't contain the hierarchy, the epics. So we would go here, back to our API reference, and we would use this work items hierarchy endpoint. Now, why? Because it contains the data about the parent and the child work items. So you see parent item, and what data do we want to see here? So we will want the system ID. We'll want the system work item type, system team project, and also the system title. Also, we can open it here and see some examples of how you can filter this endpoint. And here we are. So we're going to use a select to select all the information that we want. And we are going to use a filter to filter it by the system work item type. So by this system work item type. So the query itself is going to look like this. So work items hierarchy, and we are using select. So we are selecting the columns that are going to be displayed. The column is system ID, system work item type, system team project, system title. We want the tracked total and only the work items that have time tracked on them. And we're filtering it by work item type epic. Let's go ahead and query. And there we go. So we have the work item IDs here. We have the time tracked, the total time tracked, and we have the name of the work items here and the types. If we want to filter it if you want to filter it for a specific time frame, then what we would do is we would add a work logs filter. So the work logs filter is here, and we have this example here. So this is the query that we have been using, and we need to add this, the work logs filter, timestamp greater or equal than this, and timestamp lower than this. So let's go back into our query here and add in the timestamp filter, and now we get only get these results with the timestamp. And there we go. We have it filtered by timestamp. Now, obviously, everyone is free to create queries that fit their needs. We're just showing some basic queries here that you can use. So that's why let's move on to maybe another useful query, one that will show a sum of all time logged on a specific project. So the endpoint that we are going to be using is work logs only. And we are going to take the sum of the period length. So now bear with me. So we're here. And we change it to this, and we get the period length, or the sum of all time logged on all projects in this organization, in this one. So this is the sum of all time logged. But what if we wanted to see the sum only for a specific project? So what we would do is we would add the filter, this filter, and work items filter, system team project equals. So this is when you specify the specific name of the project. If you don't know the exact name of the project, you can use contains. So let's go ahead and now we see that the number here has changed, and we get the sum for this specific project that we have defined. So work items filter equals system team project, which is the DevOps internal name for projects. So system team project equals super project, which is one of the projects in this organization. One more interesting thing to show you today would be how to use tags. Well, rather how to query work items that have tags on them. So we would use the work items endpoint, and we would need, hold on, let me show you. And there we go. So we would need to use the work items endpoint, and we define the custom fields here as system.tags. So the custom field that we're using is system.tags. This is just the DevOps syntax for tags themselves. And we are filtering so that the tag that we're looking for contains custom string field 1 demo. So this is a tag that I created specifically for this presentation, and there we go. We get the data that we requested. So there we go. So the name of the work item is testing V, and this is all our information. But as you can see, I added the tag to this work item in this super project, and you can see the iteration here. You can see who created it, and you can see how much time has been logged on this work item. So how did we get this query? How did we get the tags? We will have to go back to our article here, the API article, but we are going to go into the reporting widgets gallery. We have a lot of reporting widgets that you can use and import, but we are going to look for the how to view work items by tags. And you can take this whole query that's here as a preset, and you can copy it and you can paste it into our reporting, and you can use it as a report. But we are here to just take a piece of this query. So we have a select here, select. So it's defining what we are selecting in the query. So we're selecting here custom string field 1, and custom fields equals system tags. And then it's filtering by contains. So to contain the custom string field, here it's kpax. In our example it was demo. So this is where we got it. This is how we knew how to create this query. So there's a lot of helpful queries that you can use here in the widgets gallery. If you can find something, usually it will be here in the widgets gallery. So let's go back. And one last thing that we would like to show you today is custom fields. Now we're not going to be doing that in Excel, but we will rather be doing this in Postman. And I'm going to have to connect to the reporting API of another project. So let's go over here to basic authentication, and let me just quickly get my token that I pasted earlier, and let's get the URL that we will be using. So here we see that we are using the 3.1 beta version of the reporting API, And we're using the work items hierarchy all levels endpoint. We are using the work items filter to filter out for system work item type, and the type is bug. We're using the system work item type bug because I know that the custom field is on this type, and we are using this custom fields, and this is the name of the custom field. So custom dot and the name of the custom field, and we're filtering the custom field so that the custom string field value equals demo custom field, which is the one that I entered. So now we're sending the request, and we get our data returned to us. So if we scroll down, we will see that the custom string field is demo custom field. So this is how you use the Timetracker Reporting API with custom fields. And back to our slides. These are some useful links that we will be providing to you at the end of the webinar. You see the 7-page Timetracker API important information, the documentation about the version 3.0 of the reporting API, and the API reference, which I already showed you how you can access directly from your settings, the reporting and REST API page. And we really appreciate you for joining us. If you need to contact us, you can always contact us at support@7page.com. And if you would like, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. This is my LinkedIn URL. So if you would like to, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And this brings us to our Q&A section, where we will be going through your questions. And
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. And if you have any questions, please feel free to raise them. We are ready to answer. And currently, while you are typing, I will send several links from this demonstration to the chat, so you could copy it. If you want any additional information, feel free to ask. Hello, Dmitry. Thank you for your question. How could we get the same data that we have from our widget? Okay, I got it. Vanya, do you want to demonstrate this?
Yep. Sure. Give me a second.
So while Vanya is preparing, the long story short, you could edit the widget, copy the query from it, and paste it directly to our API link and request the same data that you see in widget to your Excel, Power BI, or any other system you want to process this data in. So 1M.
All right. So the way to do that is you go over to our reporting page in Timetracker, and you choose a widget that you would like to see or a query in Excel. Let's take this one, for instance, team time. And you click on reconfigure. Sorry, maybe I went too fast. You reconfigure. And here you can see that the endpoint that's being used is work logs only. The version is 3.0, and this is the query. So we go ahead and copy this and go back into Excel and now it's filtering. It's displaying all the records, it seems. So we would have to filter it by time, because if we see here, give me a second. Here in the widget itself, it's using a date filter. And so what I just queried, I queried everything ever recorded. So in order to use the date filter, I'm just going to go ahead and use the filter that we have been using. Filter timestamp, okay. So it's in this month, so we have to select the proper year.
I think you paste wrong.
Yeah.
Little extra information that
Extra.
required. Yes.
Yeah, this
So
part.
from second group by, everything could be removed.
Yeah. Group by, order by. Let's hold on.
Work logs filters equal and without brackets.
Yes.
Because you pasted, copied it from another widget, and here it should be like this.
Yes, here it is. Okay. So this is the time in seconds. So what we do is we can close and load it. And we get this period length here. And if we define this by this, we divide it by 3,600, we get the 48, which is the same. If we take a look at the reporting, it's 48 here.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hello, how can I get a date-wise report which shows the time logged against different tasks user-wise? So, if I understand you correctly, you want to group by user and to see the work logs, what tasks have tracks for these users. Yes. By the way, as far as I remember, we have such a widget on a date-wise. So by default, our reporting doesn't support the several queries into one widget. But this could be achieved by Excel. For example, if you will execute, let me demonstrate this. 1 second. This query is pretty complex, so 1 second. Do you see my Excel?
Yep.
If we will, I haven't connected, so I will need some time to do this. So, okay, for example, let's connect to this one. I will select some endpoint, for example, this. It asks me for authorization. I'll authorize it. And now we will edit the source. So, for example, in Excel, you could build complex navigation steps, and with help of this, you could generate a powerful exports. So what you need is, let me read it again. So you want to group by date, then you want to group by user and to see what tasks were tracked. So you will need to firstly get all work items and group them by user and by date. And then with the help of Excel, you could execute this request several times. I mean, to get the data for each date, because you could not group by two parameters in one time. So all you need is to get this data for the user. So you could apply it by user, apply group by user. Let me check this. 1 second. So let's request work items endpoint. And then apply filter. No, not apply filter, but group by user. Name, for example. This will return us all work items that have tracks on this user, but we need also to, yeah, it's expected because we haven't finalized the query. 1 second. Yeah, of course, we need to aggregate by time period. So like this should return us username, aggregate period lengths. Okay, what I'm doing wrong here? Yeah. So we need to apply group by user. Maybe something wrong with the word group by user name. No, everything looks correct. Let me. I got it. When we use this, we need work logs, work items endpoint. Work logs, work items endpoint. Yes, it returns grouped by user. So if we'll expand, we'll see that these are grouped by users. So all you need to get this request and to execute it per days, because you want these day-wise. For this, you could use just Excel automation options and or even not in Excel, you could create it in any app you want. So if there are some automation options, like to change variables inside the query, you could replace these queries and execute several requests with changing only part of the URL, like dates. Any other questions? We have several more minutes, and if you want, you could ask your questions.
Maybe we should wait a minute or two if anyone thinks of a question.
Yeah, sure. Let's wait for a couple of minutes for any questions. And while we are waiting, just want to add to my previous demonstration that you could build any complex query you want, just decompose it to more simpler queries and automate it with functions that are built in Excel. So if you want to get tasks for each user, just request tasks per users by grouping them, and then automate it by getting it on date-wise. Okay. As there are no other questions, thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining.
Have a nice day, evening. Bye bye.
Yes,
See you.
goodbye everyone.